We are 12 picks deep into the NFL Draft 2017. Mark Rogers TV looking at the selections, and we bring in Tim Aiden from Black Shoe Diaries, of course, with the Penn State angle. And before, Tim, we came on, of course, we're already looking ahead to 2018 because of the Penn State roster is really coming into fruition in 2018 and beyond. Should be really fun. But you do have some draftable guys here. Chris Godwin is a player for me that I'm not an NFL scout. I don't know if the hip swivel is what it should be or breaking in and out of cuts. I just know that the guy went out and made freakishly impressive plays, high pointing the football, out wrestling defensive backs, especially in the Big Ten championship game. And then that Rose Bowl game, he just really made USC look silly at times.
Well, you're certainly right in all those, Mark. Yeah, Godwin he's a guy who's always, looked, he's definitely looked the part of, a borderline first rounder, early second round type. But I think scouts may have been a little iffy on that before he tested at the combine. And apparently he really wowed scouts at the combine, which started chatter of him possibly being late first round pick. But it's looking most likely like an early to mid second rounder, and he will by far be the earliest Nittany Lion picked in this year's draft. He had 1,100 yards and 69 catches this season, and including, like you said, some very memorable ones. I think the one that sticks out to me the most is in the Rose Bowl, where he had a couple really acrobatic. He caught one touchdown in the very back of the end zone after Trace McSorley scrambled and, seemed to, just kind of fire a prayer. He was being chased out of bounds. And then, of course, he also had the catch, which went off a USC player and just kind of fell into his hands. But that took some great concentration on his part. So he's definitely the guy who's wowed during the season, but wowed even more during the combine, which has him in the position that he is to be an early second round pick. So, like you said, I think next year it's going to be a much more fun conversation. We were talking about, is Saquon Barkley going to be a potential number one pick overall?
Well, Tim, based on the scouting reports, Chris Godwin would be far and away the highest draft pick that we expect, but there's certainly some other guys that should forge some decent careers in the NFL. Garrett Sickels is the first one that comes to mind for me. He was a decent producer at defensive end for his first couple of years in Happy Valley, but this past season really stepped up with 13 tackles for loss and 6.5 sacks.
Right. Sickels, another guy to keep an eye on, but he like I said, the 6 sacks were something that stuck out to me the most. And it was a bit surprising, though, that when he decided to leave, we thought some of us thought maybe he could have stuck around another year and improved his draft stock even further. As it stands right now, he's looking like a 6th, 7th round pick, and that's partially due to the fact that unlike Godwin, he did not do so hot in the combine. So his stock might have gone down a bit, but if I were a betting man, I would still bet on him getting drafted, but it won't be until the 6th or 7th round. Other guys besides Godwin that get drafted, and Malik Golden, safety, he really made tremendous strides this past year as a senior before seemed like a guy who, maybe didn't belong in the Big Ten. But he came out with a very impressive 75 tackles senior season, was solid in coverage, went from being a great liability to a great asset. And I think whoever takes it, if somebody drafts him in the 6th, 7th round, which he's projected to be, I think they could be getting themselves a steal down the road. The other guy, Brandon Bell, linebacker, he's also projected 6th, 7th round. He had very solid when he was healthy. Hard hitter, strong in coverage. He had his very last collegiate play was where he made a crucial interception in the third quarter against USC in the Rose Bowl when Penn State was in the midst of piling it on. so that helps set up another touchdown. But but unfortunately he's had injuries kind of throughout his career, so that's probably hurt his draft stock a bit. But I would still bet on him being a late rounder, 6th or 7th round.
Yeah, Brandon Bell, similar to Sickels in to a certain extent, really had the productive year before his senior season, or actually thinking of Schwann, Brandon Bell with a huge season with 89 tackles this past season, 7.5 tackles for loss, even picked off a couple passes, and that was even with missing the 3 games as he was kind of banged up along with the rest of that linebacking core around week 2, 3, 4, when Penn State, before they really kicked it into gear and got healthy. Evan Schwann is probably, to me, the best of the rest in terms of those guys that are going to try to make all the phone calls and try to get the best fit with the particular NFL camp after the draft, because most likely they won't get drafted. But Evan Schwann was just a guy that didn't see the field much as a first time, aside from special teams, but this past season really upped his draft stock and put himself in a position to at least get some pro looks with 8 tackles for loss and 5.5 sacks.
Right. Schwann's a guy who he's most likely a free agent. He could potentially sneak in there as a late 7th round pick. Like I said, he had a pretty, in his lone year, seeing significant playing time. He did make the most of it with those 5.5 sacks. So he definitely, he's the one out of all the guys that are likely to be free agent. He's the one who's most likely to make and stick to a roster, not get dropped after the preseason. 2 other guys to keep an eye on that are likely free agents. One being Naeem Wortman-White, linebacker. When healthy, he's been a very solid guy. Great tackler, strong in coverage. But unfortunately, his past 2 seasons, both times against Temple, for some reason he's ended up tearing his ACL, which is unfortunate. So, here's to hoping that Naeem actually. He's going to be a long-term project, but here's to hoping he latches onto a team, they're patient with him, and he gets another chance to prove himself at the next level. And Brian Guy is the other name to mention. He was a center. He's one of only 2 starters on offense, the other being Godwin that left the team. But he's kind of undersized. He actually came into Penn State. He was originally recruited as a defensive lineman, but then thanks to sanctions and all, and other guys not panning out, he was moved over as a necessity to the O-line. So he took some time, but he eventually became a serviceable center, and he'll get some looks perhaps from scouts as far as being brought on as a free agent to a roster. But if he's able to stick on a roster beyond preseason, I'd say a pretty impressive feat for him, and I hope he does so. So,
not a banner draft this year for Penn State, and that's a good thing for the Nittany Lions, of course, as they look to defend a Big Ten championship. But the 2 main losses, I would think, would be Garrett Sickels, Chris Godwin, both of those guys leaving after 3 years, and that's just something you have to get accustomed to. If you root for a big-time college football program, you're going to have guys leave, and even guys that you don't think should necessarily be taking off at this point would be better to stick around for another year and develop their skills for the next level. But right now it's Godwin and Sickels, the 2 top draft prospects for Penn State. Brandon Bell, a high performer, and Malik Golden, also one of the top producers for that Penn State defense over the last few years, with 75 tackles last season, most likely moving on to the NFL draft this weekend. Tim Maiden from the Black Shoe Diaries setting us up for Penn State's moves in the NFL draft that we expect to see on Friday and Saturday. Hey, Tim, we always appreciate the time.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.